Imagine yourself drifting back in time to the dawn of the Renaissance, a period that signaled the rebirth of art, knowledge, and culture across Europe. The air is filled with anticipation as centuries of darkness and stagnation begin to give way to light. It is the 14th century, and the world is changing. In the quiet streets of Italy, something extraordinary is about to unfold. After the long stretch of the Middle Ages, a new spirit of creativity and learning is awakening. Ideas are blossoming in the minds of artists, scientists, and philosophers. Inspired by the rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge, people are starting to see the world in a new light. They are questioning, exploring, and creating like never before. This period is known as the Renaissance, literally a rebirth, and it would change the course of human history forever. Art becomes more vibrant, science takes bold steps forward, and philosophy delves deep into the meaning of human existence. The Renaissance marks the beginning of a new age, one that still influences the way we think and live today. As we journey through this story, imagine the beauty of the Renaissance cities, filled with grand architecture, bustling marketplaces, and the hum of intellectual debate. Picture the brilliance of the artists, their paintbrushes moving with precision as they bring timeless masterpieces to life. Feel the excitement of discovery as scholars and inventors push the boundaries of what is known. Now, let's begin our journey in Florence, the beating heart of the Renaissance, where the seeds of this great transformation were first planted. Chapter 1. Florence, the birthplace of the Renaissance. As the soft morning light begins to spread across the Tuscan hills, we find ourselves in Florence, Italy. It is the early 15th century, and Florence is not yet the grand city it will become, but it is already known for its thriving economy and vibrant culture. The cobbled streets are lined with workshops where artisans practice their crafts, and in the distance, the magnificent dome of the Florence Cathedral is rising, piece by piece, toward the sky. Florence is the cradle of the Renaissance, and it is here that some of the greatest artistic and intellectual achievements of the period will take shape. But before the Renaissance could begin, Florence needed patrons, people who believed in the power of art and knowledge to transform society. Enter the Medici family. The Medici were wealthy bankers, and under their patronage, Florence became a hub of creativity. The Medici believed in the power of art and the importance of beauty in public life. They funded the work of painters, sculptors, architects, and scholars, transforming the city into a place where creativity and innovation could flourish. One of the most famous of these early patrons was Cosimo de' Medici. Cosimo's influence extended beyond finance. He was a man of learning, and his love for the arts and philosophy set the stage for the Renaissance. Under his guidance, Florence became a city where artists and thinkers could push the boundaries of their craft and explore new ways of seeing the world. As you imagine walking through the narrow streets of Florence, picture the city in its full Renaissance glory. The smell of fresh bread wafts from nearby bakeries, and the sounds of craftsmen hammering and chiseling away at stone sculptures echo through the air. The city is alive with possibility, and at the center of it all is the majestic Florence Cathedral, or Duomo, with its enormous dome designed by the brilliant architect Filippo Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi's dome is a marvel of engineering, and it stands as a symbol of the Renaissance spirit, the perfect blend of art, science, and ingenuity. Before Brunelleschi, No one had been able to solve the problem of how to build such a massive dome without it collapsing under its own weight. But with careful study of ancient Roman architecture and his own innovative techniques, Brunelleschi designed a self-supporting dome that would stand the test of time. The dome of the Duomo remains one of the great architectural wonders of the world, and its construction marked the beginning of Florence's rise as the center of the Renaissance. But Florence's Renaissance was not just about architecture. The city's streets were filled with artists like Donatello, whose sculptures brought new life and realism to the human form. Donatello's famous bronze statue of David, completed in the mid-15th century, stands as one of the earliest examples of Renaissance art breaking free from the rigid, stylized forms of the medieval period. David's graceful posture and lifelike features symbolize the Renaissance ideal of celebrating the beauty of the human body. Art in Florence wasn't just a way to decorate public spaces. It was a way to express the deepest ideas of humanity. For the first time in centuries, artists were looking back to the works of ancient Greece and Rome, rediscovering the beauty of the human form, the power of perspective, and the importance of emotion in art. The Renaissance was a celebration of human potential, and nowhere was this more evident than in Florence. The Medici family's investment in art also extended to philosophy and learning. They supported scholars who studied the works of ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, seeking to understand the world through reason and logic. The rediscovery of these ancient texts, preserved in libraries across Europe and the Islamic world, fueled the Renaissance's intellectual revival. As the day turns into evening, imagine yourself standing in the Piazza della Signoria, Florence's grand public square, where statues and fountains stand proudly, reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. The air is calm, filled with the distant hum of conversation, as citizens gather to discuss the latest artistic creations or philosophical debates. Florence is a city transformed, where art, science, and humanism converge in a dazzling display of creativity. This is the birthplace of the Renaissance, a place where new ideas and old traditions merge, and where the pursuit of knowledge and beauty ignites a cultural revolution. The achievements of Florence will soon spread beyond its borders, inspiring other cities across Italy and Europe to embrace the Renaissance spirit. As the night deepens and the stars appear above the skyline of Florence, let the timeless beauty of the Renaissance fill your thoughts. The rebirth of art and knowledge is just beginning, and there is so much more to discover. Chapter 2. The Genius of Leonardo da Vinci. As we continue our journey through the Renaissance, we find ourselves in the company of one of the most remarkable minds in human history, Leonardo da Vinci. Born in 1452, Leonardo embodied the spirit of the Renaissance like no other, a man whose insatiable curiosity and boundless creativity knew no limits. He was an artist, scientist, inventor, and philosopher, a true Renaissance man. His work, driven by a desire to understand the natural world, would leave an indelible mark on both art and science. Imagine walking with Leonardo through the streets of Milan or Florence. His mind is constantly at work, his eyes scanning the world around him, observing the flight of birds, the motion of water, the expressions on people's faces. To Leonardo, the world was full of mysteries waiting to be unlocked, and his notebooks, filled with sketches, inventions, and scientific observations, reveal a man obsessed with understanding the very mechanics of life. As we walk alongside him, we begin to grasp the breadth of his genius. In his notebooks, we find designs for flying machines, ideas for hydraulic systems, detailed anatomical sketches, and plans for military devices. Leonardo's creativity wasn't confined to any single field. He believed that all knowledge was interconnected, and through art and science, he sought to unravel the secrets of nature. But it is in the realm of art that Leonardo's genius is most often celebrated. One of his greatest masterpieces, the Mona Lisa, captures the essence of the Renaissance. The Mona Lisa is more than just a portrait. It is a study of human expression, light, and shadow. Leonardo used a technique called sfumato, where he blended colors and tones so subtly that the transitions are almost imperceptible, giving the painting an ethereal, lifelike quality. The soft smile of the Mona Lisa has captivated viewers for centuries. Its ambiguity and mystery embodying the depth of human emotion. Picture yourself standing before the Mona Lisa, hanging in a quiet gallery in the Louvre. The painting is small, but its power is undeniable. The delicate play of light and shadow on her face, the calm expression in her eyes, the distant landscape fading into a soft haze. All of it invites contemplation. Leonardo didn't just paint what he saw, he painted what he understood about the complexity of human experience. Leonardo's other great masterpiece, The Last Supper, painted on the walls of a convent in Milan, showcases his extraordinary ability to capture a moment of profound emotion. In this depiction of Jesus' final meal with his disciples, Leonardo arranges the figures in a dynamic, balanced composition. Each disciple reacts with shock or sorrow as Jesus announces that one of them will betray him. The painting is filled with tension and movement, yet it is also serene. A perfect example of the Renaissance blending of emotion and harmony. As you imagine standing before the Last Supper, picture the dramatic expressions on the faces of the disciples, each one uniquely responding to the news. Their bodies are arranged in a graceful, rhythmic pattern, drawing your eye toward the calm, centered figure of Jesus. Leonardo's mastery of perspective makes the scene come to life, as though you could reach out and step into the room. But Leonardo's art was only one aspect of his genius. His notebooks, overflowing with sketches and ideas, reveal a mind constantly in motion, seeking to understand the workings of nature and the human body. Leonardo was fascinated by anatomy, and he conducted detailed dissections of human bodies to understand the structure of muscles, bones, and organs. His anatomical drawings, including the famous Vitruvian Man, are both scientifically precise and artistically beautiful. In Vitruvian Man, Leonardo explores the idea of human proportion, illustrating the ideal human form based on the writings of the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius. Imagine Leonardo, alone in his workshop late at night, studying the intricate workings of the human body. The soft glow of a candle illuminates his sketches as he carefully draws muscles and tendons with exquisite detail. His goal is not just to depict the body accurately, but to understand how it moves, how it functions. To Leonardo, the human body is a masterpiece of design, and his art and science are one and the same. One of Leonardo's great passions was flight. Long before the invention of airplanes, he sketched designs for flying machines, inspired by his observations of birds in flight. He studied the anatomy of wings and tried to replicate the mechanics of flight in his designs for ornithopters, machines that mimic the flapping wings of birds. While none of his flying machines were ever built in his lifetime, His sketches reveal a mind fascinated by the possibilities of human flight. Imagine Leonardo standing on a hillside, watching birds soar above him. His eyes follow their graceful movements, and in his mind he is already thinking about how to recreate those motions. Back in his studio, he sketches prototypes for wings and gliders, dreaming of the day when humans might take to the skies. Leonardo's influence extended far beyond his lifetime. His blending of art, science, and invention would inspire generations of artists and thinkers. His insistence on observation and experimentation laid the groundwork for the scientific method, while his artistic techniques revolutionized painting for centuries to come. Leonardo's ability to bridge the gap between art and science remains one of his most enduring legacies. As we reflect on the life and work of Leonardo da Vinci, let us remember him not just as a brilliant artist or inventor, but as a man whose curiosity knew no bounds. He saw the world as a place of infinite possibility, where beauty and knowledge were intertwined. His relentless pursuit of understanding reminds us of the endless potential of the human mind. Imagine, once more, walking through the quiet streets of Renaissance Florence or Milan, knowing that somewhere nearby, Leonardo is working on his latest masterpiece, his mind filled with ideas that will continue to shape the world for centuries to come. Let his spirit of curiosity and creativity guide you into a peaceful sleep, knowing that there is always more to discover. Chapter 3: Michelangelo and the Beauty of the Human Form. As we continue our journey through the Renaissance, we encounter another giant of the period, Michelangelo Buonarroti. Born in 1475, Michelangelo was a master sculptor, painter, and architect, whose works have come to symbolize the Renaissance ideals of beauty, grace, and human potential. While Leonardo da Vinci explored the natural world through observation and invention, Michelangelo's genius lay in his ability to capture the beauty and complexity of the human form, imbuing his sculptures and paintings with life, emotion, and divine inspiration. Imagine standing in the bustling streets of Florence, where Michelangelo's early career began. The city is alive with art and culture, and Michelangelo's talent has already started to catch the attention of wealthy patrons. But his true rise to prominence would come with the creation of a sculpture that would become one of the most iconic works of the Renaissance: David. At over 17 feet tall, Michelangelo's David is more than just a statue. It is a symbol of human strength, beauty, and resilience. Carved from a single block of marble, David stands in a relaxed yet powerful pose, his gaze focused and determined, as though ready to face any challenge. The story of David and Goliath is well known, but Michelangelo's interpretation is unique. Rather than showing David in the heat of battle, he captures the moment before, when the young shepherd is calm, composed, and filled with confidence. Picture yourself standing before David, surrounded by the soft light of a Renaissance courtyard. His muscular form is perfect in its proportions. Each detail, his hands, his feet, his facial expression, carefully crafted to evoke a sense of strength and humanity. The veins in his hands are visible. His body is both relaxed and tense, ready to spring into action. Michelangelo's David represents not just the biblical hero, but the Renaissance ideal of man as the measure of all things. Imagine the sound of the chisel tapping against marble in Michelangelo's workshop. He worked with intense focus, shaping the stone with both brute force and delicate precision. Michelangelo believed that the sculpture was already inside the block of marble, waiting to be revealed, and it was his task to free it from the stone. As you visualize the process, you can feel the deep connection between artist and material. Every stroke of the chisel brings David closer to life. But Michelangelo's genius was not confined to sculpture alone. In 1508, he was commissioned by Pope Julius II to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, a task that would take 4 long, grueling years. Michelangelo was a reluctant painter. He considered himself a sculptor first and foremost. But the result of his efforts would become one of the greatest masterpieces in the history of art. As you close your eyes, imagine lying on your back in the Sistine Chapel, gazing up at the magnificent ceiling that stretches above you. The ceiling is filled with vibrant, dynamic scenes from the Bible, painted with incredible detail and emotion. At the center of it all is the iconic image of the creation of Adam, where the hand of God reaches out to give life to the first man. The space between their fingers seems to vibrate with energy, capturing the very moment when life is transferred from the divine to the human. The colors of the Sistine Chapel are rich and vivid. The blues, reds, and golds shimmer in the candlelight, giving the figures an almost three-dimensional quality. Michelangelo's figures are muscular and powerful, their bodies twisted in dramatic poses that convey the tension and emotion of the scenes. The ceiling tells the story of the creation of the world, the fall of man, and the journey toward salvation. But it also serves as a reflection of the Renaissance belief in human potential and divine inspiration. Imagine Michelangelo, high on scaffolding, working for hours on end, his body contorted as he painted. The physical and mental strain was immense. His neck and back ached. Paint dripped onto his face, and the sheer scale of the project seemed overwhelming at times. Yet he persevered, driven by his desire to create something monumental, something that would transcend time. The Sistine Chapel ceiling is not just a work of art. It is a testament to Michelangelo's indomitable spirit and his belief in the power of art to elevate the soul. But Michelangelo's contributions to the Renaissance did not end with his paintings. He was also a brilliant architect, and later in his life, he was commissioned to design the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, one of the most important architectural achievements of the Renaissance. Drawing inspiration from Brunelleschi's dome in Florence, Michelangelo created a design that was both elegant and structurally sound, a fitting symbol of the grandeur and spirituality of the Catholic Church. As you walk through the streets of Rome, imagine the awe-inspiring sight of St. Peter's Dome towering above the city skyline, its graceful curves reaching toward the heavens. Inside, the vast space of the basilica is filled with light, its walls adorned with marble and gold, its atmosphere serene and contemplative. Michelangelo's vision for the dome was not just an architectural marvel, it was a spiritual experience, designed to inspire awe and devotion in all who entered. Throughout his life, Michelangelo was driven by a deep, almost spiritual connection to his art. He believed that beauty was a reflection of the divine, and that by creating works of art, he was bringing himself closer to God. His sculptures, paintings, and buildings were not just products of his immense skill. They were expressions of his soul, his struggles, and his faith. As we reflect on the life and works of Michelangelo, let us remember that his art was more than just a display of technical brilliance. It was a testament to the Renaissance belief in the power of human creativity, the ability to transcend limitations, and the pursuit of beauty as a way to understand the divine. His works continue to inspire, reminding us of the limitless potential of the human spirit. Now, as you imagine the calm, steady chisel of Michelangelo shaping marble, or the quiet brush strokes of paint on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, let yourself be carried into a state of deep relaxation. His creations, timeless and profound, stand as symbols of the eternal quest for beauty and truth. Let his work, his vision, and his dedication guide you into a peaceful, restful sleep, where the wonders of the Renaissance continue to shine. Chapter 4. The Revival of Classical Knowledge. As we move further into the heart of the Renaissance, we arrive at a pivotal force behind this incredible rebirth of art, science, and thought, the revival of classical knowledge. The Renaissance was not only about creating new works of art or making scientific discoveries. It was also about rediscovering and reintegrating the wisdom of the ancient world, particularly the philosophies and writings of the Greeks and Romans. These ideas, which had been buried or forgotten during the Middle Ages, were suddenly brought to light again, offering fresh perspectives on human potential, reason, and beauty. Imagine yourself walking through the quiet, candlelit halls of a Renaissance library. Shelves lined with scrolls and leather-bound manuscripts fill the room, while scholars, scribes, and students sit at long wooden tables, poring over ancient texts. The air is filled with the rustling of pages and the soft murmur of discussion as these thinkers rediscover the words of Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, and other great minds of the classical world. These ancient writings, long lost or ignored, are once again at the center of intellectual life. The revival of classical knowledge began in Italy in the 14th century and was driven by a group of scholars known as humanists. The humanists believed that the study of classical literature, history, and philosophy could provide a better understanding of human nature and society. They were convinced that the wisdom of the ancients contained the keys to living a virtuous and meaningful life. Humanism, as this intellectual movement became known, focused on the value and dignity of the individual, emphasizing reason, ethics, and the pursuit of knowledge. As you picture these humanists studying ancient texts, imagine the excitement they must have felt as they uncovered forgotten manuscripts or translated works from Latin and Greek into the languages of the day. In dusty monasteries and private collections across Europe, ancient works were being discovered and shared. One of the greatest treasures of the Renaissance was the rediscovery of Plato's writings, which had a profound impact on the way Renaissance thinkers viewed the world. Plato's philosophy, with its focus on ideals, virtue, and the search for truth, resonated deeply with Renaissance humanists. The revival of classical knowledge was not just a return to old ideas. It was a process of reinterpretation and reinvention. Renaissance thinkers didn't just want to copy the works of the ancients. They wanted to understand them and apply their principles to the world around them. They saw the ancient Greeks and Romans not only as models to be emulated, but as partners in a long conversation about what it means to live a good and just life. One of the key figures in this revival was Petrarch, often called the father of humanism. Petrarch was a poet and scholar who believed that the study of ancient literature could lead to moral and intellectual improvement. He collected and translated many classical texts, sharing them with his contemporaries. To Petrarch, the wisdom of the ancients provided a guide for how to live a virtuous life, and he believed that by reviving classical learning, society could be elevated to new heights of understanding and culture. As the influence of humanism spread, scholars began to rethink the nature of education. They developed a new curriculum, known as the Studia Humanitatis, which included the study of grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, and moral philosophy. This humanist education was designed not only to teach knowledge, but to cultivate wisdom and virtue, preparing students to be active, responsible citizens who could contribute to the betterment of society. Imagine walking through a Renaissance classroom, where students sit attentively, listening to their teacher discuss the great ideas of the ancient world. They study the works of Cicero, learning the art of persuasive speech. They read Homer and Virgil, gaining an appreciation for the beauty of poetry and the complexities of the human experience. In these classrooms, the seeds of the modern liberal arts education were planted. The revival of classical knowledge wasn't limited to philosophy and literature. It also had a profound impact on art and architecture. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael were deeply influenced by the study of ancient sculpture and architecture. They sought to recreate the balance, harmony, and proportion that defined classical art, but with their own innovative twists. One of the clearest examples of this influence is seen in the architecture of the Renaissance. Architects like Brunelleschi and Alberti looked to the buildings of ancient Rome for inspiration. They studied Roman ruins, particularly the Pantheon and other grand structures, to understand how the ancients used geometry, perspective, and symmetry to create spaces that were both functional and beautiful. Renaissance architects took these classical principles and applied them to their own designs, creating buildings that reflected the order and balance of the natural world. Imagine standing in the middle of a grand Renaissance building, perhaps a cathedral or a palace. The ceilings are high, the windows large, and the columns perfectly proportioned. Everything around you feels harmonious, as though the building itself were a reflection of the divine order. The revival of classical architecture was not just about aesthetics. It was about creating spaces that elevated the human spirit and brought people closer to perfection. This fusion of classical knowledge and Renaissance innovation is perhaps most beautifully illustrated in Raphael's fresco, The School of Athens, painted in the Vatican during the early 16th century. Imagine gazing at this masterpiece, which depicts some of the greatest philosophers of the ancient world: Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and many others, engaged in a grand debate about the nature of reality and the meaning of life. Raphael's figures are lifelike and dynamic, their gestures conveying the intensity of intellectual discussion. The painting is a celebration of both the classical past and the Renaissance present, a visual reminder of the dialogue between the old and the new that defined the Renaissance. As you reflect on the revival of classical knowledge, imagine the excitement and optimism that filled the air during this period. The rediscovery of ancient wisdom seemed to open new doors, offering new ways of thinking about the world and humanity's place in it. The ancient Greeks and Romans had laid the foundations of philosophy, art, and science, and the Renaissance took those ideas and built upon them, creating something new and transformative. The revival of classical knowledge also laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution, which would follow in the 16th and 17th centuries. The emphasis on observation, reason, and experimentation that characterized classical thought inspired Renaissance scholars to question traditional beliefs and seek new ways of understanding the natural world. The seeds planted by the humanists in their study of the ancients would eventually bloom into a new era of scientific discovery, where thinkers like Galileo, Kepler, and Newton would change the way we see the universe. As the Renaissance continued to unfold, the revival of classical knowledge helped to shape a new vision of humanity, one that emphasized reason, beauty, and the pursuit of truth. The lessons of the ancient world were not forgotten, but reimagined, offering hope and inspiration to generations of thinkers, artists, and dreamers. Chapter 5: The Invention of the Printing Press and the Spread of Knowledge. As the Renaissance blossomed across Europe, another revolution was quietly unfolding, one that would change the course of history forever. It wasn't a work of art or a philosophical treatise that sparked this revolution, but a machine, the printing press. Invented by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440, the printing press allowed for the mass production of books, making knowledge more accessible than ever before. It became the engine of the Renaissance, propelling the ideas of the time to every corner of Europe and transforming the way people learned, communicated, and thought. Imagine the quiet whir of Gutenberg's printing press as the first pages of text are carefully inked and pressed onto paper. Before this invention, books were painstakingly copied by hand, usually by monks in dimly lit monasteries. This process was slow, laborious, and incredibly expensive, which meant that books were rare, and only the wealthy or scholarly elite had access to them. Gutenberg's invention changed all of that. For the first time in history, books could be printed quickly, efficiently, and at a fraction of the cost, allowing ideas to spread like never before. Gutenberg's most famous printed work was the Gutenberg Bible, a beautiful, carefully crafted edition of the Latin Bible. Though it was still a luxury item at the time, the Gutenberg Bible demonstrated the power of the printing press. Soon, printing presses were popping up all over Europe, and as they did, the world was transformed. Imagine walking through the bustling streets of a Renaissance city like Venice or Paris, where printing shops had become a common sight. The air is filled with the sound of printers at work, the click and clatter of type being set, the smell of ink thick in the air. People gather outside the shops, eager to purchase the latest printed books and pamphlets, which range from religious texts to philosophical treatises to stories of distant lands. The printed word was no longer the exclusive domain of the elite. It was now in the hands of ordinary people. With the spread of the printing press, knowledge became democratized. Books that had once been the treasures of kings and scholars were now available to anyone who could read. The works of ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, rediscovered by Renaissance scholars, were now being printed and distributed across Europe. Humanist ideas, which emphasized the value of the individual and the importance of education, reached a wider audience, encouraging a new generation of thinkers to explore the possibilities of reason and inquiry. Imagine sitting in a quiet room with the soft glow of a candle illuminating a newly printed book. The pages are crisp and clean, the text carefully printed, and for the first time, you hold in your hands a work of profound wisdom, something previously reserved for a select few. The words of Plato or Cicero now belong to you, and you can read them, contemplate them, and let them shape your understanding of the world. But the printing press wasn't just a tool for preserving the past, it was also a means of spreading new ideas. As the Renaissance continued, scholars and scientists began to use the press to publish their own works, sharing their discoveries with a growing audience. One of the most significant examples of this was the scientific revolution, which gained momentum in the 16th and 17th centuries. Scientists like Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler used the press to circulate their groundbreaking theories, challenging long-held beliefs about the nature of the universe. In 1543, Nicolaus Copernicus published De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, in which he proposed a heliocentric model of the universe, suggesting that the Earth revolved around the Sun rather than the other way around. This idea was revolutionary, and the printed book allowed it to spread far beyond Copernicus's immediate circle of scholars. It reached the libraries of universities and the hands of other scientists who would go on to refine and expand his ideas. Imagine a world where the great mysteries of the cosmos are being questioned for the first time in centuries. A young student might sit by the light of a flickering lantern, reading Copernicus's words and marveling at the possibility that the Earth is not the center of the universe. The printing press made such knowledge accessible, sparking curiosity and debate across Europe. Another figure who benefited from the power of the printing press was Galileo Galilei, whose work would challenge not only the scientific understanding of the universe, but the very authority of the Church. Galileo used the press to publish his observations, which supported Copernicus's heliocentric theory. His book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, was widely read and discussed, but it also brought him into conflict with the Catholic Church. The printing press allowed Galileo's ideas to reach far and wide, shaking the foundations of traditional belief systems. But the printing press wasn't limited to science and philosophy. It also transformed literature and the arts. The works of Dante, Chaucer, and Petrarch were printed and distributed, making poetry, prose, and storytelling available to a broader audience. The press gave rise to new literary forms, such as the pamphlet, which allowed authors to express their ideas quickly and cheaply. This new form of communication was particularly powerful during the Protestant Reformation, when figures like Martin Luther used pamphlets and printed sermons to challenge the Catholic Church and promote religious reform. Imagine the streets of Wittenberg, where Martin Luther's 95 Theses were printed and circulated, igniting a religious revolution. The printing press enabled Luther's ideas to spread rapidly across Europe, reaching people in cities and villages alike. It wasn't just religious leaders who could now shape the narrative. The power of the printed word was in the hands of individuals, giving them a voice in matters of faith and belief. The impact of the printing press extended beyond Europe. As exploration and trade expanded during the Renaissance, so too did the reach of printed materials. Maps, navigational charts, and accounts of explorers like Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus were printed and distributed, fueling a sense of adventure and curiosity about the wider world. Printed books became the companions of travelers, spreading knowledge about distant lands and cultures. As we reflect on the invention of the printing press, it is clear that it was one of the most important technological innovations in human history. The Renaissance may have started with a renewed interest in art and classical knowledge, but it was the printing press that allowed those ideas to take root and spread, transforming Europe from a place of isolated knowledge to a continent brimming with intellectual exchange. The printing press allowed the Renaissance to transcend its origins in Italy and reach countries across Europe, from England to Spain, from France to the Netherlands. It fostered a culture of learning and inquiry, where knowledge was no longer locked away in monasteries, but was accessible to anyone with the curiosity to seek it. As you imagine the quiet hum of Gutenberg's press, printing page after page of text, let yourself be carried by the steady rhythm of progress. The printed word, once a rare and precious thing, is now within reach of all who seek it. The Renaissance, with its new ideas, bold explorations, and revived knowledge, spreads like a ripple through history, touching lives, sparking debates, and shaping the world in ways that will be felt for centuries to come. Chapter 6. Renaissance Art and Architecture Across Europe. As the Renaissance spread from its birthplace in Italy, its ideas, styles, and innovations began to take root across Europe, transforming art and architecture in ways that would leave an enduring legacy. The artists and architects of France, Germany, Spain, and England embraced the Renaissance ideals of balance, harmony, and humanism, blending them with local traditions to create a distinctly European Renaissance. Each region developed its own interpretation of the Renaissance spirit, but all were united by the belief that art and architecture could express the grandeur of humanity and the divine. Imagine walking through the streets of a Renaissance city, the grand buildings rising around you, adorned with intricate carvings, columns, and domes that draw your eyes upward. The air is filled with the sounds of daily life, and everywhere you look, you see beauty, in the symmetry of the architecture, the grace of the statues, and the vibrant colors of the paintings that adorn the walls of churches and palaces. This is the Renaissance come to life, where art is not just decoration, but a way of understanding the world and celebrating the human experience. The spread of Renaissance architecture. In Italy, Renaissance architecture was born out of a deep respect for the classical ideals of symmetry, proportion, and geometry. Architects like Filippo Brunelleschi and Leon Battista Alberti drew inspiration from the ancient Roman ruins that dotted the landscape. They reintroduced the use of columns, domes, and arches, creating structures that were both functional and beautiful. Imagine standing before the towering dome of the Florence Cathedral, a masterpiece of engineering and design. The massive dome, designed by Brunelleschi, was a triumph of Renaissance ingenuity, and its influence spread far beyond the borders of Italy. As Renaissance ideas traveled across Europe, architects in other countries began to adopt and adapt these classical principles. In France, the Renaissance made its mark in the grand châteaux that dotted the Loire Valley. These majestic palaces, built for royalty and the nobility, combined the elegance of Italian Renaissance design with the Gothic traditions of medieval France. One of the most famous of these is Château de Chambord, with its soaring towers, elegant arches, and grand staircase. A perfect blend of French grandeur and Renaissance sophistication. Imagine yourself walking through the gardens of Château de Chambord, the perfectly manicured lawns stretching out before you. The symmetry of the palace is mirrored in the landscape, and as you approach the building, the intricate stone carvings and expansive windows welcome you into a world of refined beauty. In Germany and the Netherlands, Renaissance architecture took on a more restrained, yet equally impactful form. The city halls, palaces, and churches of these regions featured clean lines, simple yet elegant facades, and a focus on practicality and function. In the northern European cities, Renaissance architecture often blended with the local Gothic styles, resulting in a unique fusion that celebrated both the old and the new. Renaissance art across Europe. While Italy was the epicenter of Renaissance art, with figures like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael leading the way, artists in other parts of Europe also embraced the new techniques and ideals of the Renaissance, transforming the artistic landscape of the continent. In Northern Europe, particularly in the Netherlands and Germany, artists such as Albrecht Dürer, Jan van Eyck, and Peter Bruegel the Elder developed their own distinct styles, characterized by meticulous attention to detail and a deep interest in the natural world. Unlike their Italian counterparts, who often focused on idealized beauty and classical themes, Northern Renaissance artists sought to depict the world as it truly was, with all its imperfections and complexities. Imagine standing in front of one of Dürer's detailed engravings, his careful lines capturing every nuance of texture and light. Dürer, considered one of the greatest artists of the Northern Renaissance, was a master of many mediums, painting, engraving, and woodcutting, and his work reflected both the influence of Italian humanism and his Northern roots. His self-portraits, filled with intense realism, showed the artist as a thinking individual, embodying the Renaissance ideal of the universal man. In Flanders, Jan van Eyck revolutionized painting with his mastery of oil paints, creating luminous, lifelike portraits and religious scenes that seemed to glow from within. His Ghent altarpiece is a masterpiece of precision and color, with its vibrant, jewel-like tones and intricate details. Van Eyck's work emphasized the material world, but it also carried a deep spiritual resonance, blending the sacred with the everyday. As you imagine walking through a gallery filled with these works, you can almost feel the texture of the fabrics in the portraits, the shimmer of gold leaf on the altarpieces, and the lifelike expressions of the people depicted. Northern Renaissance artists didn't just paint subjects, they captured the essence of their world in all its beauty and complexity. In Spain, the Renaissance was heavily influenced by the Catholic Church, which commissioned works of art and architecture that expressed the power and glory of both God and the Spanish monarchy. One of the most famous Spanish Renaissance artists was El Greco, whose dramatic, elongated figures and vibrant colors set him apart from his contemporaries. His paintings, such as the Burial of the Count of Orgaz, combined elements of Byzantine, Mannerist, and Renaissance styles, creating a deeply spiritual, otherworldly effect that reflected both the mysticism of Spain and the humanism of the Renaissance. The Renaissance in England. In England, the Renaissance took root slightly later than in the rest of Europe, but its impact was no less profound. Under the reign of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, England experienced a flowering of culture, particularly in literature and theater. While Renaissance architecture and visual arts were slower to develop, the period saw the rise of William Shakespeare, whose plays captured the complexity of human nature with unprecedented depth and nuance. Imagine the bustling streets of Elizabethan London, filled with merchants, craftsmen, and theater-goers. The Globe. Theater stands tall along the banks of the Thames, where crowds gather to watch one of Shakespeare's latest plays, perhaps Hamlet, Macbeth, or Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare's works, filled with rich language, timeless themes, and unforgettable characters, embody the Renaissance spirit of exploration, creativity, and the celebration of human experience. In terms of architecture, England saw the development of the Tudor style, characterized by the fusion of Gothic and Renaissance elements. Stately homes like Hampton Court Palace, with its blend of medieval fortifications and Renaissance elegance, stand as reminders of England's place in the larger Renaissance movement. The enduring legacy of Renaissance art and architecture. As we reflect on the spread of Renaissance art and architecture across Europe, it becomes clear that this period was not just about creating beautiful works, but about reimagining the world. The Renaissance introduced new ways of thinking about space, perspective, and the human form. It bridged the gap between the sacred and the secular, showing that art could be both a celebration of the divine and a reflection of the everyday. The artists and architects of the Renaissance didn't just copy the classical forms of the past, they reinvented them, blending the old with the new to create something entirely unique. They sought to capture the beauty, power, and complexity of the human experience, whether through the towering grandeur of a cathedral dome or the quiet intimacy of a portrait. Imagine now, as the sun sets on a Renaissance city, the golden light reflecting off the grand buildings and statues. The people of this time, like the artists and architects they admired, were filled with a sense of possibility and discovery. Their world was expanding, and with it came new ideas, new creations, and new ways of seeing. Chapter 7. The Scientific Revolution and New Ways of Thinking. As the Renaissance reached its peak, a new revolution was beginning to unfold, one that would not only change the way people created art or built magnificent structures, but also fundamentally alter the way they understood the world around them. This was the Scientific Revolution, a period of groundbreaking discoveries and innovations that transformed science, philosophy, and human thought. At the heart of the scientific revolution was a new approach to understanding the natural world. Renaissance thinkers, influenced by classical texts and the humanist ideals of inquiry and reason, began to question long-held beliefs about the cosmos, the earth, and the laws of nature. Instead of relying on tradition or religious dogma, these early scientists, often called natural philosophers, used observation, experimentation, and mathematics to seek answers. Their discoveries would set the stage for modern science and reshape the intellectual landscape of Europe. Imagine standing beneath the vast night sky, filled with stars that seem to stretch endlessly in every direction. For centuries, people had believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe, with the stars, planets, and sun revolving around it. This view, known as the geocentric model, had been established by ancient Greek philosophers and embraced by the Church. But now, this understanding was being challenged, and a new vision of the universe was emerging. One of the key figures in this revolution was Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish astronomer who dared to suggest that the Earth was not, in fact, the center of the universe. In 1543, Copernicus published his groundbreaking work De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, in which he proposed the heliocentric model of the universe. According to Copernicus, the Earth and the other planets revolved around the Sun, not the other way around. Picture Copernicus sitting in a quiet room, poring over his calculations and star charts. His model was radical and controversial, as it directly contradicted the teachings of the Church and centuries of accepted wisdom. Yet, through careful observation and mathematical reasoning, Copernicus laid the foundation for a new understanding of the cosmos, a universe in which the Earth was just one planet among many, orbiting a distant sun. Although Copernicus's ideas were revolutionary, it would take time, and the work of other brilliant minds, for his heliocentric model to gain widespread acceptance. One such mind was that of Johannes Kepler, a German mathematician and astronomer. Kepler expanded upon Copernicus's ideas, discovering that the planets did not move in perfect circles, as the ancient Greeks had believed, but in elliptical orbits. His laws of planetary motion, published in the early 17th century, helped explain the mechanics of the solar system with greater precision. Imagine Kepler sitting beneath the stars, patiently charting the movements of the planets over the course of years. His observations, combined with his mathematical genius, led to a deeper understanding of how the planets moved in relation to the Sun. Kepler's work was a triumph of the Renaissance spirit of inquiry and discovery, blending mathematics and observation to uncover the hidden patterns of the universe. But it was Galileo Galilei, an Italian scientist, who would provide the most dramatic evidence in support of the heliocentric model. In 1609, Galileo built one of the first telescopes powerful enough to observe the heavens in detail. Through his telescope, Galileo made astonishing discoveries: the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and the rugged surface of the Moon. His observations provided direct evidence that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but part of a larger, dynamic system. Imagine standing beside Galileo, gazing through his telescope at the moons of Jupiter, tiny, glowing orbs orbiting a distant planet. For the first time, humanity was seeing the universe in a new way, through the lens of scientific observation rather than philosophical speculation. Galileo's discoveries were revolutionary, but they also brought him into conflict with the Catholic Church, which clung to the geocentric model as part of its theological worldview. In 1632, Galileo published Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, a book that boldly defended the heliocentric model. The book was widely read, and Galileo's ideas began to spread throughout Europe. However, the Church saw his work as a direct challenge to its authority. Galileo was tried by the Inquisition and forced to recant his views, spending the last years of his life under house arrest. Yet, despite this setback, Galileo's work laid the groundwork for the scientific method and inspired future generations of scientists. As you imagine the quiet defiance of Galileo, locked in his study but still pursuing his research, you can sense the tension between the old and the new, the conflict between tradition and the emerging scientific worldview. But the scientific revolution would not be stopped. The seeds of inquiry planted during the Renaissance had begun to bear fruit, and a new way of thinking about the world was taking hold. While Galileo was peering through his telescope at the stars, other Renaissance thinkers were exploring the mysteries of the Earth itself. Isaac Newton, an English mathematician and physicist, would come to dominate the next phase of the scientific revolution with his discovery of the laws of motion and gravity. Newton's work, published in 1687 in his monumental Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, provided a unified framework for understanding both the motion of celestial bodies and the physics of objects on Earth. Imagine Newton sitting in a garden, watching an apple fall from a tree. This simple observation, combined with his deep understanding of mathematics, led Newton to formulate the law of universal gravitation. He realized that the same force that caused the apple to fall to the ground also governed the motion of the planets in the heavens. Newton's laws of motion and gravity revolutionized science, showing that the universe was governed by consistent, discoverable laws. The scientific revolution, like the Renaissance itself, was a period of intense curiosity and exploration. It was a time when thinkers sought to understand the world not through superstition or tradition, but through observation, experimentation, and reason. The spirit of inquiry that defined the Renaissance paved the way for modern science, as scholars from all disciplines sought to uncover the mysteries of the natural world. But the scientific revolution was not just about astronomy or physics. It also touched on biology, medicine, and anatomy. During this period, Andreas Vesalius, a Flemish anatomist, published his groundbreaking work De Humani Corporis Fabrica, on the fabric of the human body, in 1543. Vesalius's detailed anatomical drawings, based on dissections of human cadavers, challenged long-held assumptions about the human body, many of which had been passed down from the ancient Greek physician Galen. Vesalius's work laid the foundation for modern medicine, showing that scientific observation could lead to a deeper understanding of the human body and its functions. As we look back on the scientific revolution, we can see how it was deeply connected to the Renaissance itself. The Renaissance had revived interest in classical knowledge, but it had also encouraged a spirit of innovation, creativity, and inquiry. The artists, architects, and scientists of the Renaissance were all driven by a desire to understand the world more deeply, to uncover its beauty, its order, and its laws. The legacy of the scientific revolution continues to shape our world today. The methods of inquiry developed during this period, observation, experimentation, and the use of mathematics, form the basis of modern science. The discoveries of Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton opened the door to a new understanding of the universe, one that continues to expand with each new generation of scientists and thinkers. As you reflect on the great minds of the scientific revolution, let their sense of wonder and curiosity guide you into a peaceful state of mind. The mysteries of the universe, once thought to be beyond human understanding, are now within our grasp. The night sky, filled with stars and planets, invites you to dream of the infinite possibilities that lie beyond our world. Close your eyes and let the spirit of discovery carry you into a restful sleep, knowing that the search for knowledge is a journey that never truly ends.